So I'm here with Rob right now. We're actually in the truck. We just got some lunch. And Rob is my very close friend that I talk about who, forgive me if I get the words wrong, but he studies equity and trust law. And he's been a mentor to me when talking about not only how to talk and deal with your customers and do business in a contractual way, but there's a higher form to all this. And based off can't I just give a handshake? Well, this is even higher than that. It's called equity. It's the highest form of law. And if you pay attention to what Rob's going to talk about, I really believe that you'll walk away. And if you let it sink in, what we're talking about right here, it will help you tremendously in your business and how you do business and how you see business and make you more successful. And I'm super happy that Rob's here. What's up, Rob?
How's it going, Keith?
What was the saying by Bouvier you were talking about?
John Bouvier wrote the first American law dictionary, so it's not a European legal dictionary. It's based in American heritage of freedom and rights and things of that nature. But he said that the written law is nothing without equity, and equity is everything, even without the written law. So that's kind of a riddle to try to figure out, well, how could anything be written and be less important than something that's unwritten? So that is a riddle, and maybe today we'll try to solve some of that.
It's powerful. Even when you say it, the written law is nothing without equity.
Yeah.
And equity is everything, even without the written law.
Yes. So it's pretty important. And equity is a confusing word because modernization does a lot to words. They kind of turn them around and redefine them, and it gets confusing to really understand what people before us understood. So some people that pay mortgages may have a difference between what they owe and what its market value is. And so financially, that's considered equity. It's a financial equity. And then recently with social constructivism, we have what's called social equity, and that is an equality of outcome, meaning everybody gets the same outcome. So that's probably the most common usage today because it's so politically charged that people are talking about social equity when they're talking about equity. But that's not where equity originates. Equity originates far before banking and far before any recent social constructivism. So we like to look at the old version because it's timeless. You can't change the definition. There's no hypocrisy in it, right? There's no confusion about it once you understand what it is. It'll always be there. It always has been there, and it's here now. So it's timeless, if you will. So it's pretty reliable from that perspective, where some of these other equities aren't as reliable because they don't have the same origin. They're derivatives. So somebody is trying to use the original and create something from it to borrow the integrity from the original. That's what derivatives are for the most part.
That right there.
It's huge, but for people who are new to it, they're not going to see what you just saw when you gasped. So it takes a little bit of time.
Because my brain synapsed, and I saw that all across the board, all over the world.
Yes.
In all different forms and facets.
So, and that's common from the people that I study with and the things that we do. We'll call it wordcraft, right? Or terms of art. In other words, they're kind of painting something with it. There's a little bit of the original in it, but it has a different intent and purpose to lead you away from it, to borrow the credibility, to take you to their outcome in their self-interest.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's wordcraft. It's like twisting. Some people might call it gaslighting. You know, there's a variety of ways to describe that. And some people might call it legalese, but
legalese. I won't even go into it just real quick. Here's an example. I met a guy who was first year in his landscape business. He showed me this binder that was literally 7 or 8 inches thick. In the front of it, it was black, like beautiful leather. It was gold embossed with this logo. And inside, he must have had 300 pages of beautiful pictures of his work and license insurance and all the protocols and everything about the business. I'm flipping through this thing and I was like, how in the hell? It's your first year, bro. He's like, when I take this and I show this to clients, it's like, he really just copied all that stuff from someone else's book. And I was like, where did you get the pictures of the work? And he was like,
More of the Untrapped podcast right after this. Looking to maximize your production in the field? Ballard Products has over 300 products that can help you get the most out of your efforts every day. Ballard Products. Whether you are looking to get a better cut, keep your gear on your machine, keep your expensive equipment clean and safe, or just get the most out of your machines, Ballard has you covered. Ballard Products. Jump onto our easy-to-use updated website at ballard-inc.com to get your gear ordered today. Keep grinding. Stay safe. And have a great season. Ballard. Make sure to use the code Keith10 to save 10% on our full line of gear. That's Keith10. This is Untrapped with Keith Kalfas.
But it's a derivative, right? It's to borrow something that was from a true place of equity to...
Right, it derived from a different source.
And maybe the intentions were good, and I appreciate the hustle. But at the same time, if you can't back that shit up...
Yeah, there's a breach of trust there, and there's an implied authenticity.
Implied authenticity.
Well, he's implying, yeah, I did all this. This is my company. Is that, am I getting that right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not authentic, so it's implied authenticity. It's not express authenticity.
Interesting.
He's not coming out and saying, this is my work. He's saying, this is my company. Here's my logo. Mm-hmm. This book is big and full of stuff. I'm implying that I am describing my business and that I put all of this together from the knowledge of my business, my customer, and my industry. But he didn't.
If all that was real and he followed through, that would be
authentic. That'd be express authenticity. He's expressing the authenticity rather than implying that it's authentic.
Implying.
That's magic, right? It's casting spells. It's spelling, right? It's casting spells. It's hypnosis. It's another form of wordcraft.
So what is an example of doing equity?
Doing equity, what is fair and just and moral and right, is equitable.
You know what? I had a mistake a few years ago on a landscape job. We were finishing up walking the property with a customer. We ripped out, reinstalled the garden beds, put new fabric and decorative stone and edging and planted all these shrubs. And we really did a great job. And we even fixed the little tire tracks from our dingo machine and, new sod and sand. Everything was real beautiful. And we're finishing and I'm collecting like the final $6,000 portion of the check. And as we're back there, there's a garden bed that was next to the garden beds that we'd never even touched. No, I'm sorry. We ground some stumps over there, but we had never even discussed repairing and redoing those garden beds as well as the other ones. No, they weren't the only two. There were other garden beds like that, but these ones were close to the ones. And all of a sudden, as I was walking the property to collect the final check, it had dawned on me that I had not clearly communicated verbally or in the contract that, is it implicitly or specifically, those garden beds and confirmed with the customer was not part of the job. And so when the customers, they looked over at that, they probably already just knew it because we didn't talk about it. But all of a sudden I got really scared and paranoid and I just didn't say anything. It was this funny situation. I was totally moral and honest and ethical and trying my best to be as more forthright as possible. But in that moment, I was like, wait a second, because your brain goes, if I say, were we supposed to do those too? The customer could easily say, oh yeah, I thought you were going to do those too. And now I'm on the hook.
We just made an offer and they just accepted it.
We had never even talked about doing those garden beds. But
I
made a mistake.
Are we supposed to do those too? You just made an offer. And they said yes. They accepted your offer. That's what happened equitably.
When I first started the business, I used to do shit like that all the time. I would get paranoid and scared and start agreeing to do shit. And then I did so much free work because I felt like I didn't want to be out of equity, but I didn't understand the game that I was playing, what was going on.
Well, equity is notice. That's part of it. So
yes, give notice.
Here's a maxim. What's included is not excluded. What is excluded is not included. So if you're having exclusions, right, those should be outside of the box. In this case, maybe you have a map of the yard. We're going to do this, this, and this. This is excluded. Write an X through them or something, just so that there's a visual representation of what the expectations are. So
visual and in the contract and at least point out to the customer verbally and say, just to be clear, this is not part of it. Is that correct? But then sometimes when people talk, people forget shit.
Well, yeah, that's why there's a rule of 3. You should try anything that's important. You should probably express it 3 times. So you could do it verbally. That would be 1 time. In your contract, written might be a 2nd time. A picture of it could be a 3rd time. Could be in a memorandum and then it's in the contract and verbally. Those are 3. Could be on a text or an email. Could be in the contract. So you try to just so that, 1, 2, 3, where's yours that said it was included?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? It's like you have this overwhelming notice that you've given and they just have some hallucination That's going to be an inferior claim.
An inferior claim.
Yes.
So that which is included is not excluded, and that which is excluded
is not included. That's a maxim. Like, you can't argue with that. Maxims are the truth. Principles are the truth, right? Doctrines are the truth. Because they've been studied by so many different people over so much time, they're held to be true.
Yes.
That's why the 10 Commandments in the Bible, if you want scriptural equity, you can't violate any of those because they express the truth in those 10 Commandments. Those are maxims or doctrines or principles, however you want to examine them. They're going to produce an outcome that is equitable scripturally.
They're going to produce an outcome that's equitable scripturally.
Yes.
So that which is similar is not the same. That which is the same is not similar. Imagine that you're standing.
That's a good one. But technically, it's things that are the same are not similar. For if they were similar, they would not. Wait, I think it's the other way. But yeah, so things that are not.
Things that are similar are not the same.
Things that are similar are not the same. For if they were the same, they would not be similar. Right. And they seem really simple and obvious, but when we get tangled up in controversies and conflicts, we make things complicated. And so when you drop in something that's simple like that, people are like in shock because all the mental fiction dissolves and falls away, and all there is this pristine granule of clarity, right? And then when you look at it through that lens, what you wind up having is kind of like a superpower. So that's why equity is everything, even without anything that's written. Because you could be writing fraud into your contracts and not even know it. But then you apply the lens or the eyes of equity, and it's just like, nope.
It allows you to clearly see what's right and wrong and how to do
what is fair and just and moral and right. Bouvier also said in that same quote, for those that only rely on the written law, they can never see what's right and wrong as well as those with the eyes of equity. So when you live an equitable life, you disinvite chaos and struggle and suffering and misery because you're being inequitable. You're contributing to all of those circumstances. You're inviting them in. So when you sharpen your eyes of equity and your decisions and behavioral, the way you decide and the behaviors those decisions generate, when you clean that up, you disinvite the chaos, you disinvite the misery and the suffering and the confusion and the conflict and the controversy and all of that stuff. It's not convenient, especially at first, because we're all kind of indoctrinated to be chaotic and confused and self-righteous and self-interested and all that kind of stuff. So we're constantly contributing.
I mean, who knows people who create their own suffering and drag other people through it.
Yeah, because
I've done a little bit of that in my life to people and to myself.
I had an instructor once that had a little story he would tell us about. He would tell us as students trying to get this stuff right. He would say, there's a maxim I made up, he said, and it's, there can only be one asshole in the room. And he said, if you're looking around and you can't find them, he says it might be you. But what he meant by that is when somebody is causing a problem that's really self-centered and has no equity in it, that you don't join them at that level and do your version of the same thing, thinking that that's going to solve it, right? Because you can't solve something with the same level of consciousness that was used to create it.
That sounds like my wife and I argue about petty shit.
Well, yeah, you guys are, and you've been through the personal growth and development stuff, and you and I have worked on it, but that's what we refer to as first stage, when you're so self-interested you can't consider anything beyond your self-interest. Mm-hmm. It's like an infant is born first stage, right? My dirty diapers, my hunger, my discomfort, my insecurity. That's all that is real for them. And then as we grow up, hopefully we can expand to include somebody else's set of circumstances, at least by the time we're teenagers and start falling in love or whatever, then we start considering somebody else.
For compromising in functionality and fairness, and then
trust law. Yeah, that's equity. And so equity is everything, right? Even without anything you write on paper or read in a book. So 2 assholes in the room is one too many. You don't want it to be you when you're trying to outgrow these things that invite this chaos or this misery or this suffering. And equity is the cure for it, but it's not for everybody.
There's this funny thing is when you need money and you're watching motivational videos on YouTube that are teaching you how to close more deals and more sales at higher prices, but maybe the stuff you're following is a little bit higher calibrated than what you're ready for right now or currently set up to handle. So you go take on too much, you say yes too many things, and now you're...
Yes. So if you're trying to take on what some of the equity masters of the early or the late 1700s in this country, early 1800s, they referred to it as a non-religious articulation of a God consciousness or the teachings of Christ. It's not religious, but it's principled in the same way for doing trade and commerce because of those first stage, right, survival instincts and decisions of behaviors and moods. When you adhere to equity, you can get through those storms, right, with less damage to yourself and to others, right? It's the cure for all that unnecessary suffering. From a first stage, it looks absolutely necessary to go beat that guy's ass, right? Or to shoot him, or whatever. You can get pretty extreme. But if you go back to the equity, you'd be surprised. And this is what diplomats understand. That's why they can have these complex, huge, multinational problems. And as diplomats, they know how to handle equitable outcomes. But ever since commerce has taken over, diplomacy really is about who has control over the market, right? So it gets kind of dominating. And so it's not really equitable. It's commercial.
Yeah, which means that how can we get out of this problem with it costing me nothing or passing the burden on to someone else? Or how can I get away in this situation to make the most amount of money? Or I think that if money makes people funnier, it's kind of like that saying that when it's all purely commerce, the equity can be put to the side because you're always thinking about what's in the best interest for the business and for me. And
well, the law of the jungle is might is right. So it's tyrannical, right? Tyranny, tyrants, it's bullying, it's a dominance hierarchy. And in equity, it's a competency hierarchy. So depends on what kind of environment that you want to live in. Right? Do you want to live where gangs and bullies run the streets? Right? Or do you want the type of environment where people who have the most competency create outcomes that are fair and just and moral and right? And that's been a struggle for our species longer than we have historical records of it. So it's not going to go away. And people on one side have a lot of financial might because they've adhered to those principles, right? Of might is right and domination and tyranny. So recently we've seen a lot of that come right out in front of our eyes. And then on the other side, you have people that probably the most visible are like people that are scripturally principled. But there's also people out there that live what's called privately, and not the private they talk about out in the public. That just means non-government. But actually privately, meaning living in private estates with private trusts that have had these unincorporated trusts for generations, right? Even before the country was founded as a union of states, colonies that turned into states, there were families here that had these unincorporated trusts and estates and still have them in their lineage today and have nothing to do with the government. But they're scripturally principled. Right? And under exclusive equity, which excludes all the other equities, excludes the public, it's a non-religious articulation of those teachings. It's a very it's not the law of the jungle, right? It's a higher law form. In scripture, it says a narrow path that leads to the wide gate. And it's narrow. Equity is narrow because you can't trespass or injure the rights and properties of others. So you have to consider, how does my decisions and behavior today not injure me or trespass against me, the gifts I was given by nature, the laws of nature, nature's God, or however you want to look at it. And not only today, but tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, next decade, all the way through the rest of my life. That starts narrowing down your options.
I'm imagining a factory that's got runoff that's like toxic going into a beautiful lake, a river stream of...
Yeah. They don't have a right to do that. They're just doing it because it's convenient for their self-interest. But it's trespassing and injuring.
Yeah, so a week, a month, a year, 5 years down the road, that's a horrible thing.
But now, to make the path even narrower, what about your neighbor or your family, right? Trespassing or injuring on their rights. the path starts to get really narrow. But
I know last night our in-laws came over, my brother and sister-in-law and their kids, and we all sat at the table and ate. And like, dude, I hate Kentucky Fried Chicken. It's horrible for you. And they're like, well, that's what we're bringing. I'm like, whatever. So I'm eating this chicken sandwich, and I was like, screw it if I'm already eating out. So there was a big bucket of chicken, but it was over by them. And I had already ate my chicken sandwich. I was like, what's in that bucket? So I pulled it over to me, and I pulled out a chicken drumstick. There was plenty of chicken in there. I ate another piece of chicken. And then they took all the leftovers with them. There was like 10 pounds of friggin' leftovers and biscuits. And as they walked out the door, my brother-in-law, he looked at me, gave me a funny look as he walked out the door. And I was like, did he look at me like that over that piece of chicken?
He might have felt trespassed on because he offered you your portion and you went beyond it.
And that's been bugging me, man. It's so simple. I was like, oh my God.
Well, that's a subtle trespass.
Because I live in a world of like, have you ever seen What About Bob?
Yeah.
The movie where you got to see it. They're at the table eating chicken. But anyways, I thought about that. But then my wife said she had PayPal'd them $26 for half of all the food. And they took all the rest home. And I like to live like, kind of like in an abundant world. Like, who cares? Like, you come over to my house, you can eat whatever you want. But
that's your value.
Yeah, see, that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
How do you feel those little subtle distinctions of...
So that's what I'm trying to get to, is that you're going to narrow that path by having to consider other people. It can't be just first stage like we talked about earlier. You have to get to a point where you can consider the circumstances of others, and you have to do it in real time. So you got to be present in that moment to see what the moment is informing you of, right? You can't be in your head thinking about next week or whatever, or last year.
My wife is so good at stuff. Anybody comes over, she's awesome. So you want a water? You want a Coke? You want this? Yeah. Anything they like. She's so...
Right. So hang on.
I was born in a barn, bro.
No.
All right. Sorry to make this about me. Go.
Some people say I'm egocentric, but enough about them. So if you're going to make a decision or engage in a behavior that doesn't trespass or injure other people today, or if what you do today doesn't injure them next week or next year or 10 years from now, you see how your options get really narrow.
Yeah.
But they lead to a wide gate of a promise that equity promises. And the reason it's a narrow path and a wide gate is because pretty much everybody's born with the capacity to do it. That's why the gate is wide. We all can get through it and benefit from this promise, right? But few of us develop the ability to do it. So we all have the capacity to do it, but few of us develop the ability. But when you do develop the ability, that's the eyes of equity. The ability is discernment, the eyes of equity.
So we do landscaping and window cleaning. When we clean windows, because it's easy to point out a spot on a window, we have some customers that are such OCD perfectionists that they're going around looking for the smallest microscopic, questioning everything to the point where it's, I mean, dude, I really care about what we do. We do a beautiful job. I mean, we make windows clean and we do it the right way.
Yeah.
So is equity, oh, I'm sorry, man, let me fix it. I'll fix this too. We'll come back. We'll do
maybe.
Yeah.
Right? What is fair and just and moral and right? Did you say, well, for this price, we're going to go over it once. We're going to do our best on that one pass, but that's it. Otherwise, you got to take package B where we meet your satisfaction based on reasonable complaints or something like that. That's notice, giving notice. Notice is part of equity.
See, that's what I'm talking about.
See, if you seek equity, like you want them to be grateful and you want them to refer you and they want them to be happy to pay and all of that. If you seek equity, you must do equity. If you do equity, you must come to it with clean hands, which means you can't be in dishonor and expect equitable outcomes. See, it's pretty simple. It's not complex, but because we're trained to be heady and busy-minded and have our first stage interests, right, in money or whatever, override all of our inner guidance and all of that, makes it challenging because we have habits we've developed throughout our lives. We turn on the TV, there's the same habits, everybody has them. That must be normal. Well, it is normal because what normal is average. And when you look out there, that's average behavior because everybody's chasing money as the priority. It's tuned in such a way that you can't feel like you're surviving or succeeding without having that kind of a priority. So it's not that trying to make money is bad, right? It's that if it's not grounded in equity, here comes the confusion, the misery, the controversy, the chaos. You see what I'm saying? So if you want a happy life and a prosperous life, you have to have equitable intelligence.
Equitable intelligence.
Or it can't occur.
Or
you can convince yourself, because I just got a new car, but that's going to wear off, or I just got a promotion, or I have a different girlfriend or boyfriend for a while. But that's not true equity, right? That's just kind of a gratification for a while that'll wear off.
Stick around as Keith returns with more of the Untrapped podcast in just a moment. Hey, if you're looking for what is probably the greatest software ever to run your business on, go to getjobber.com/Keith. You can create proposals, invoices, collect payments, even track your entire business directly on the Jobber smartphone app. And if you want to get a totally free trial of Jobber right now, open your browser, type in getjobber.com/Keith, and if after the trial you decide you want to sign up with Keith's link, you'll automatically get 20% off your first 6 months. So what are you waiting for? Go to getjobber.com/Keith. The Untrapped podcast continues.
This is good, man. I like it. We could keep going and going and going. We'll just stop
That's
right
what we
here.
do.
All right, man. That is this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want more just like this, you want to hear more from Rob, we can do maybe another one next time we get lunch. And
see what people say. Because it's not for everybody. You know, most people, it's not instant gratification, right? It's so as you journey through your life, you have more fulfillment in your life and less aggravation, struggle, suffering, right? Feeling like you're on that gerbil wheel and there's nothing else. Yeah.
I like to see, before you upgrade your lifestyle and go buy that $80,000 truck and a nicer house and all that stuff and get yourself on the hook for debt, I think it's important to get some of this stuff ironed out first.
That way you won't need the $120,000 one in 2 years for another hit.
All right. Talk next time.
Hey, I hope you liked the show. And if you like the Untrapped podcast and you get value from it, can you please take a minute and go over to Spotify and leave it a well-worded positive 5-star review that helps boost the rankings on Spotify so the show can get to more people. Therefore, these messages can get out to more people and inspire more people so then they can go out and start their small businesses and crush it and get to the next level. It's a huge deal. All right, I'll see you in the next show.